Hello everyone, we are from Group 1 and now we will be talking about non-test instrument. So without any further ado, let's get started. But first, let's get acquainted with us. In Group 1, there are Febriana with ID number 102, Laili Maftukhah with ID number 122, and I, Nadhifa Salma Putri with ID number 131, and last but not least is Yasmin Fatimah with ID number 137.
Definition: non-test instrument can be interpreted as a tool to collect comprehensive data. It means non-test instrument can be used to assess various aspects of the respondent so that if it is not only to assess cognitive aspect but also affective and psychomotor aspect. And then, types of non-test instrument. Instruments that are classified as non-test are grade scale, questionnaire, checklist, interview, observation, and curriculum vitae. The first is credit scale. The scale describes a value for an outcome consideration. Usually, the numbers used are applied on a scale with the same distance in succession from the low to high. Therefore, such a scale is called credit scale. This scale can be used to record objectively assess the appearance or description of a person's personality. Example, student attendance scale at school. And the next is questionnaire. Questionnaire comes from the Latin, namely questionnaire, which means a series of related questions with the object being valued with the intent to get information or data. Questionnaires are also often referred to as questionnaire. Questionnaire is a list of questions that must be filled out by the person who will be measured or respondent.
Next is kinds of questionnaire. Based on the content, there are 4 questions. 1. Fact questions, 2. Behavior questions, 3. Information questions, and 4. Opinion questions. Based on the type, there are 3 questionnaire. 1. Closed questionnaire, 2. Open questionnaire, and 3. Combined questionnaire. Based on the respondent, there are 2 questionnaire, direct questionnaire and indirect questionnaire. And the last, based on the intermediary, there are 2 questionnaire, mail distributed questionnaire and direct is distributed questionnaire. Next, based on the contents, there are 4 questions. 1. Questionnaire with fact questions. A fact question is a question that asks about facts, including the number of schools, a month's time of study, the number of students, the height and weight of the students. 2. Questionnaire with behavior questions. Behavioral questions are questions that use if the researcher wants information about the respondent's behavior in the educational process. Example of behavioral question is, do you often cheating on the test? 3. Questionnaire with information questions. Information questions are questions that are used if through the instrument the researcher wants to reveal various information or use facts. And the last is questionnaire with opinion questions. This question relates to feelings, beliefs, and values related to the object being assessed. Example of opinion question is, are you disappointed when your teacher gave you score 5 on your report card? Next is based on type. 1. Closed questionnaire. In a closed questionnaire, alternative the answer has been determined. Respondent just choose among the alternatives that has been provided. Examples of closed questionnaire is, are you like math? A. Yes or B. No. 2. Open questionnaire. Alternatives answer are not provided. Respondents create their own answer and compose sentences in their own language. Example of open questionnaire is, in your opinion, why math is difficult? And the last is combined questionnaire. An alternative answer is provided and if it is not appropriate, the respondent can present their own alternative answer. Example of combined questionnaire is, what lesson do you like? A. Science, B. Mathematics, or C. Write down your answer. Next, based on the respondents, there are two questionnaires. First, direct questionnaires. Direct questionnaires is a questionnaire that is directly answered or filled out by the individual who will be asked for information. And the next is indirect questionnaires. Indirect questionnaire is a questionnaire that are filled out by other people, that is people who are not subject to the required information. For example, educators need information about how a child learns at home. This questionnaire was filled out by their parents. The last is based on intermediary. There are two questionnaires. First, mail-distributed questionnaire. This form of questionnaire is useful if the researcher is constrained by the distance to the respondent. In addition, if using an email system, researchers will find it easier to organize data from the questionnaire. And two, direct distributed questionnaire. Respondents will receive their questionnaires directly, and the advantage of this form is that the time required is relatively short.
Checklist is an observation record tool containing a list of statements about aspects that may be contained in a situation, behavior, and activity. It's either individual or group. A checklist is also a series of statements that usually in the form of short sentences in which the respondent simply puts a match mark on the correct choices. Next is interview. Interview is a process of interaction or conversation between the interviewer and the interviewee directly, where the interviewer asks about aspects that are assessed and have been designed beforehand. In addition, interviews are a method for get respondents' answers by asking questions unilateral. It is said to be unilateral because the respondent is not given the opportunity at all to apply questions. And then types of interview. There are three types of interview. First is planned and structured interview, which the interviewer prepares in advance in detail the questions to be asked according to a certain pattern using a standard format. Second is unstructured planned interview, which the interviewer plans and prepares the material but does not detail it according to a specific format. And last is free interview, which the interviewer is not bound or regulated by certain guidelines, and the interviewee has the freedom to express his or her opinion. And next, I will be talking about observation. Observation is a technique that is done by making observations. These observations were carried out carefully and recorded systematically. In addition, through observation, a researcher can find out the non-verbal behavior of respondents, such as activities or other educational programs other than at school. So next is types of observation. There are two types of observation that can be divided into based on framework and based on technical information. First, we will be talking about based on framework. There are two kinds of observation based on framework. First is structured observation, which is all teacher activities as observers have been determined in advance based on a framework that contains factors that have been arranged in a scenario. And second or last is not structured observation. All teacher activities as observers are not limited by a defined. Next is observation based on technical implementation. First is direct observation, namely observations made directly to the object under investigation. Second is indirect observations, namely observations made through intermediaries, both techniques and instruments. And last is participatory observation, namely observation made by taking part of or involving oneself in the situation of the object. And now, let's talk about curriculum vitae, or we used to call it a CV. Curriculum vitae is a description of a person's condition during his lifetime. The record does not mean anything to someone else's assessment, but it can be a useful guide when related to the data. By studying the curriculum vitae, the researcher can conclude about the personality, habits, and attitudes of the assessed respondents.
The next one is non-instrument development test steps. Okay, so the first step is instrument specification. The instrument specification consists of the purpose of the instrument and the instrument grid. The purpose of developing a non-test instrument is highly dependent on the data to be collected or the purpose of the research. After the purpose of preparing the instrument is determined, then it is necessary to look for the relevant theory or coverage of the material. The next activity is compiling the instrument grid. The grid is in the form of a matrix table containing the specification of the instrument to be written. Next, develop an operational definition based on a conceptual definition. Then, determine the aspect dimension that construct the development instrument. The second step is writing instrument. Instruments are arranged based on the grid that has been made. Instrument can be in the form of statement or question. The rules that need to be considered when writing instrument items are 1. Avoid sentences that contain multiple interpretations. 2. Avoid statements that are facts or that can be interpreted as facts. 3. One statement contains only one complete thought. 4. Statements are formulated in simple sentences. 5. Avoid using the word always, all, never, and the like. And the last one is a brief statement or question formulation. The third step is determine the instrument scale. There are several scales commonly used to measure the affective domain, including the Likert, Thurston, Goodman, and differential semantic scales. For Likert, the answer to each instrument item using a Likert scale has a gradation from very positive to very negative. For example, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. For Goodman, with this type of measurement scale, you will get a firm answer, namely yes or no, right or wrong, never or no, positive or negative, and so on. For differential semantics, arranged in a continuum line where very positive answers are located on the right of the line and very negative answers are located on the left of the line, or vice versa. And the last one is Thurston. The Thurston scale is a scale that is compiled by selecting items in the form of an interval scale. The fourth step is scoring system. The scoring system used depends on the scale used. Furthermore, an analysis is carried out for the student level and grade level, namely by finding the mean and standard deviation of the score. The result of the analysis are used to interpret the affective domain of each student and class toward an object. The result of the interpretation then needs to be followed up by the teacher by making improvements, such as improving learning methods, using teaching aids, and etc. Step 5. Instrument review or validation. The activity in the review instrument is to examine 1. The suitability of the question or statement with indicators. 2. The communicativeness of the language used. 3. The correctness of the grammar used. 4. Whether there is bias in the question or statements. 5. The attractiveness of the instrument format. And 6. The adequacy of the instrument items so that they are not boring. The study was carried out by an expert in the field being measured, and it would be better if there was an assessment expert. The results of the study are then used to improve the instrument. Improvements were made to the construction of the instrument, namely, the sentence used, the time required to fill out the instrument, how to fill it out, and etc. The sixth step is assembling the instrument. After the instrument is revised, it is then assembled by paying attention to the format, layout, sequence of statements, and question. The order of the statement corresponds to the aspect to be measured. And the step 7 is instrumental trial. Once assembled, the instrument was tested. The trial sample is selected whose characteristics represent the population to be assessed. At the time of testing, what should be not are suggestions from the respondent. The eighth step is analysis of trial result. The analysis of the test result includes variation in the answer to each question or statements item. Another indicator to consider is the index of reliability. And the last step is revised instrument. Improvements were made to the question or statement that were not good. Improvement based on the test result and suggestion from the respondent. Okay, so this is the example of the non-instrument test. To read it, you can pause this video so you can see it clearly, the example. Okay, that is all from our group. I hope you understand our explanation. See you next time.